is we are finally getting ready to go over to the Karmelo Anthony trial. Now, if you were living under a rock or didn't hear about this situation, this is Karmelo Anthony, where he is on trial right now for first-degree murder.
One of the most high-profile murder trials North Texas has seen in years begins tomorrow in Collin County. 18-year-old Karmelo Anthony faces a first-degree murder charge connected to the April 2025 stabbing death of 17-year-old Austin Metcalf at a high school track meet in Frisco. Jury selection is set to start first thing tomorrow morning. Tonight, a look back at the case, the fallout, and the legal fight ahead. It was the kind of story that moved fast, first through Frisco, across North Texas, then nationally.
It took my soul too. I'm so sorry.
A fight under a team tent, a knife, and a 17-year-old student athlete who died in his twin brother's arms.
He was going to turn out to be a great individual.
Austin Metcalf was a student at Frisco's Memorial High School. Police say he was stabbed on April 2nd, 2025, during a district track meet at Kirkendall Stadium. Investigators say Karmelo Anthony, then also 17, was sitting under a tent for a school he did not attend. According to eyewitnesses, Metcalf told him to leave. What happened next will be at the center of this murder trial. Police say Anthony fatally stabbed Metcalf once in the chest. His father, Jeff, expressing his disbelief to Fox 4.
I told him it's not goodbye. It's see you later.
Online, the case exploded. Rumors raced ahead of facts. From jail, Karmelo Anthony claimed self-defense and was held on a $1 million bond. But 12 days after the crime, he was released on house arrest after a judge reduced his bail to $250,000, in part because of his clean record.
Now, let me say something. Now, when we first heard about this case, a lot, like they mentioned, a lot of rumors came out. A lot of people were bringing up facts saying like, oh, he was getting jumped. Oh, we don't, and then just making up a bunch of wild stuff that the police have never verified. All we know for sure, or at least all we understand right now, is that some kind of altercation happened. If I understand correct, Austin Metcalf pushed him or put his hands on him, something like that first. And then in a reaction, for some reason, Karmelo Anthony ended up taking out a knife and stabbing him in the chest. Now, I don't know about y'all, but if he would have swung at him, okay, there would have been a fight. That's different. That's understandable. Male testosterone, growing up boys, yeah, I can understand that. But to pull out a knife and stab someone in the chest? Now, I don't know how they're going to prove self-defense, but at the end of the day, I think he needs to go to jail for that. Because I can't make the jump from him pushing you to you stabbing him in the chest. But they might come out with some evidence that we didn't know. But let's keep going into this.
3 days later, a press conference was called on his parents' behalf. They begged the public to turn down the temperature.
I don't know why we're being targeted and discriminated against before a fair trial.
Though the heat would only rise after Austin Metcalf's father showed up to a press conference and was escorted out by Dallas police for not having an invitation. Now, after months of relative quiet, the arguments move from online debate to a Collin County courtroom. Jury selection begins Monday and is expected to last 3 days. Former Dallas County Assistant DA Russell Wilson is not connected to the case, but says finding jurors who have not heard about it or have not formed opinions will be a challenge.
I actually believe you can certainly get somebody who believes that they are unbiased, but whether or not they actually are, you don't necessarily know until the actual case starts unfolding.
The defense is expected to lean hard into self-defense. In Texas, that shifts the burden to the state.
If self-defense is an issue in the case, the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was not self-defense.
For prosecutors, it may all likely come down to the sequence of events under that tent.
They've got to come in and show, in essence, that the conduct that occurred prior to this incident did not warrant the amount of force that was used.
That is what ultimately matters. How much force did you use in response to a situation? That's what the line that draws self-defense to murder. You can't just, if somebody ends up touching you, end up killing somebody. That's too much. Or we have to understand where that line is. But they're going to test that and see what the jury thinks.
Strict rules are in place. No cameras inside the courtroom. There's also discussion about limiting other electronic devices, all to preserve order and keep the case from turning into a courthouse spectacle.
For the lawyer's perspective, part of it is to try to shut out the noise.
Noise in the court of public opinion about to shift to a real court. So Fox 4 will bring you
Absolutely crazy situation. But let's take a look at this next video and do a deep dive into his self-defense. How exactly he's going to prove self-defense.
You cannot stab someone in the chest and kill them because they touch you. I think a lot of what this case is going to come down to is going to remind us of what happened in the O.J. Simpson case. The race card is going to be played here.
A Texas student athlete charged with stabbing a football star from a rival high school to death is set to face trial this week. Karmelo Anthony, then a 17-year-old senior from Frisco Centennial High School, stabbed Frisco Memorial High schooler Austin Metcalf on April 2, 2025. After Metcalf asked Anthony to leave his team's tent during a track meet, prosecutors have claimed. Witnesses say Anthony told Metcalf, quote, "Touch me and see what happens," while reaching inside his bag before a brief scuffle, in which Anthony stabbed Metcalf in the chest with a knife. Anthony then allegedly fled as Metcalf bled out in his twin brother's arms. The case kicked off a major racial uproar online, with donations pouring in to defend Anthony. A family spokesman said last year that the money would go to, quote, "stand with us in the fight against white supremacy." As Anthony's lawyers say he acted in self-defense, the New York Post spoke with a criminal defense attorney to break down the case.
Hi, my name is Randy Zellin. I am a criminal defense attorney. I have been practicing for 38 years. I am a former prosecutor, and I have been an adjunct professor at Cornell University School of Law.
Now, I've said this several times. It's hard for me to understand just being a defense attorney in general when you have to try to defend someone who does these horrible crimes. But everybody is entitled to a defense. But let's keep going into this.
First of all, when we're talking about justification, self-defense, what I am saying as a defendant is that I had a reasonable belief that someone was going to immediately hurt me. That is justification against ordinary force. Now, up that ante. If I use deadly force on someone, if I kill someone, and my defense is self-defense or justification, the jury has to be not convinced, if you will, by the government that I acted reasonably, that I reasonably believed that I was about to be killed. And as a result of that reasonable belief that I was about to be killed, I killed first. I killed in self-defense. So the first issue I see here, from what we know, this was a verbal altercation where it almost seems like the defendant was provoking the incident himself by allegedly saying, "Touch me and see what happens," as he's reaching into a bag. And then apparently he was touched. Touching someone is not deadly force. You cannot meet deadly force. You cannot stab someone in the chest and kill them because they touch you. They've got to be coming at you with a knife. They've got to be coming at you with a gun. They've got to be coming at you with a metal pipe to split your head open.
Now, let me say, I'm not going to pause it too much, but I'm thinking, at least this is my guess, that educated guess, but basically he's going to use either how he's saying self-defense, he's going to try to say that he feared that he was going to get jumped. That's what I think is going to come out, because a lot of people had speculations on if he was getting jumped, if the twin brother was going to jump in and fight him with him. And that they're going to play on that fact that he was not sure if the brother would jump in or not. So he feared for his life in that account. At least that's my initial thinking, but we never know what will come out. Let's keep going into this.
Can't be justified in killing someone with a knife and stabbing them in the chest if they were not about to immediately use deadly force on you. Then now take the opposite end. We see at the beginning whether or not the defendant was justified, and at the end we see something called consciousness of guilt. The fact that he fled the scene, to me, cuts against a self-defense, a justification defense, because if I acted innocently and I just stabbed someone because I thought they were going to kill me, I don't think I would run. So I don't think that the defendant's sense was reasonable, that he was about to be killed, nor do I think his behavior afterwards is consistent, is equally unreasonable from the standpoint of behaving like someone who is innocent.
Now, I don't know if you can say that for in fact, just because the prosecution can say, or the defense attorneys can say, that he just feared for his life still, or he was still scared in that situation, so he decided to flee the situation. He didn't know what was going to happen afterwards. And then that's why he initially came out to the police, or after he ran, and then he came out and found the police himself.
What the defendant was doing with a knife on him, I think, is going to be telling. So you have the absence of the ability to use deadly force versus someone having deadly force immediately on hand at a high school track meet. So unless he was a chef, unless he was a fisherman, what is he doing with a knife that is capable of killing someone with apparently one strike? So that's going to be another hurdle that I see the defense having to overcome. But if we're going to play this case down the middle, I think a lot of what this case is going to come down to is going to remind us of what happened in the O.J. Simpson case. The race card is going to be played here. And I do believe that the defense is going to be looking for a jury that's going to say, I don't know what happened here, and I don't even care what happened here, but I am so tired of white people doing things to black people, and it's the black people that end up on trial, and it's not right and it's not fair. It's something called jury nullification. And I do believe that race has already been and will continue to be a very big issue in this case. It's not fair to the prosecution. I don't think it's fair, quite frankly, to any race where a defendant is playing that card. But as a defense attorney, that ain't my job. My job is to get my client off by any means reasonably and legally necessary.
It's some people immediately after the case, they didn't hear the facts. They immediately said, especially they didn't even hear more of the facts. The only things they heard was that Austin Metcalf touched Anthony, and then Anthony, in response of that, he stabbed him. And some people were saying, oh, well, he should have never touched him in the first place. I don't like to think like that. First of all, if Anthony would have responded and swung at him, I'm understanding of that. People, that's what happens between boys at a young age, especially that's what happens. Kids get into fights. It's going to happen. Civilized fights. Well, it's not civilized, but you know what I'm saying. Hand to hand. But I would never believe it reasonable if it's just a one-on-one altercation to where you just get touched. They didn't say punch. They haven't even specified exactly how he touched him yet. But he got touched, and he pulls out a knife and stabs someone. Now, I don't see how that's reasonable to me. So I don't know if I don't know why other people don't see that and they're only looking at the race car. But let's go over to just a little AI breakdown just to wrap it all up and see if anything else we missed. So as we know, his jury selection began yesterday. As we know, it was an 18-year-old who is facing 5 to 99 years in prison if he is convicted of fatally stabbing the student back in that April 2nd, 2025 altercation. They say there's nearly 600 prospective jurors, and it's going to take place between June 1st and June 3rd. The opening statements will begin Thursday, June 4th, if the 12 jury members is seated on the schedule. The trial is anticipated to last approximately 2 weeks, and the prosecution plans to call more than 30 witnesses. I wonder how many witnesses the defense is going to call, or if they're going to just bank on the fact that he was a scared young kid. But we'll have to wait and see. So as we know, the core things about this argument is the self-defense. Anthony's defense attorney is heavily relying on self-defense argument under Texas law. The defense maintains that Anthony was protecting himself after he put his hands on him. Because Texas law treats 17-year-olds as adults in the criminal system, Anthony was indicted as an adult on first-degree murder in June 2025. Wow. We got to wait to find out more information on this whole situation. But tell me, y'all, what are your thoughts on this situation? Where do you stand on the side? Do you think that he should have never touched him in the first place and he got what he was coming to him? Or are you standing on the same side of my thinking where it's reasonable force? If he would have touched him and swung at him, that's a totally different story. But the fact that you took out a knife and stabbed him, that sounds like murder to me. But let me know your thoughts on your situation, y'all. I don't know everything, so if you have a different viewpoint, let's talk about it, y'all. The world's a crazy place, but we have to review this stuff together.